In 1964, a woman named Kitty Genovese was stabbed to death outside her apartment building in New York City. It took over 30 minutes, and according to reports at the time, 38 of her neighbors heard her screaming. Some turned on their lights and watched from their windows. A few opened their doors. Nobody called the police until it was over. 38 people, 0 calls. When the story broke, the public reaction was outrage. How could 38 people do nothing? What was wrong with New York? What was wrong with people? Two psychologists, John Darley and Latané, had a different question. They didn't ask what was wrong with those people. They asked what was wrong with the situation, and what they found would permanently change how we understand human behavior in a crisis. Darley and Latané ran a series of experiments in the years that followed. In one study, a participant sat alone in a room filling out a questionnaire. Smoke began to drift in under the door. Within 2 minutes, most people got up and reported it. Then they ran the same study with 3 people in the room instead of 1. The smoke drifted in, and most of the time, nobody moved. They glanced at each other, looked back at their questionnaires, and kept writing as the room slowly filled with smoke. Same situation, same smoke, completely different response. In another study, participants heard someone in another room have what sounded like an epileptic seizure, gasping, choking, asking for help. When participants were told they were the only one who could hear it, 85% ran to help within 60 seconds. When participants were told there were 4 other people who could also hear it, only 31% helped, and they took twice as long to do it. The conclusion Darley and Latané reached was simple and devastating. The more people who witness an emergency, the less likely any one of them is to help. They called it the bystander effect. Before we go further, if you're finding this as fascinating as I do, take a second to subscribe and hit the like button. We put out new psychology videos every week, and every subscriber genuinely helps this channel grow. Now back to it. So why does this happen? The first reason is something called diffusion of responsibility. When you're alone and something goes wrong, the responsibility is entirely yours. If you don't act, no one will. That weight is clear and immediate. But the moment other people are present, that responsibility disperses. It spreads across everyone in the crowd like dye dropped into water. No single person feels the full weight of it anymore. Someone else will probably call. Someone else is probably already handling it. You assume others have already done what needs to be done, so you don't do anything. Nobody does anything for exactly the same reason. The second reason is pluralistic ignorance. Humans are social creatures. In ambiguous situations where we're not sure what's happening or what the correct response is, we look to others for cues. If everyone around you seems calm, you assume it must not be that serious. If nobody else is running toward the noise, you decide the noise probably doesn't require running toward. You're reading the crowd to calibrate your own reaction. The problem is that everyone in the crowd is doing exactly the same thing. Everyone is reading everyone else. And because everyone else appears calm, everyone else appears calm because they're reading you appearing calm. It's a mirror pointed at a mirror. Nobody is actually processing the situation independently. Everyone is waiting for someone else to define it. And in that wait, nothing happens. The third reason is evaluation apprehension. Acting in front of others is uncomfortable. What if I overreact? What if it's nothing and I look foolish? What if I make a scene? People in crowds don't just fear doing nothing, they also fear doing something and being wrong. The social cost of false alarm is real, and in a crowd, that fear is amplified. Everyone is watching. Everyone will see if you misjudge it. So people hesitate. They calculate. They wait for certainty that never quite arrives. What happened to Kitty Genovese is now one of the most cited cases in the history of social psychology. But it's worth noting that later investigations complicated the original story. The 38 witnesses figure was likely inflated, and some accounts suggest at least one neighbor did try to call for help. The situation was almost certainly more chaotic and ambiguous than the clean narrative suggested. But the core finding it inspired, that groups of bystanders consistently fail to act in ways that individuals alone do not, has been replicated dozens of times across cultures and contexts, in labs and in the real world. The bystander effect is real. It just doesn't require a villain. It doesn't require people who are apathetic or cruel or indifferent. It requires ordinary people, in a group, each waiting for someone else to go first. The effect scales. A 2011 study analyzed security footage from public spaces in Lancaster, England, bus stations, city centers, shopping areas. They looked at conflicts that escalated to the point where intervention would be appropriate. In almost 91% of cases, at least one bystander intervened. In larger crowds, more people intervened. This seems to contradict Darley and Latané, but there's a distinction. These were ongoing, visible situations where the threat was unambiguous. The bystander effect is strongest in ambiguous situations where people aren't sure if something is wrong or what to do. When the threat is clear and urgent, the diffusion of responsibility can shift into collective action. The problem is most real-world emergencies start ambiguous. The person slumped on the subway platform might be sleeping. The raised voices from the apartment next door might be a movie. The delay in ambiguity is where the bystander effect lives, and the delay is often when it matters most. Knowing about the bystander effect actually changes behavior. Studies consistently show that people who have learned about it, who understand the mechanism, are significantly more likely to intervene in an emergency than those who haven't. The knowledge itself is protective, so here's how to use it. First, if you're ever in a crowd and something goes wrong, assume the bystander effect is operating. Assume everyone around you is waiting for someone else to act, and that no one has called for help yet. Don't read the crowd, read the situation. Second, in an emergency, don't shout for help in general. Be specific. Point at one person and say, "You in the red jacket, call 911 right now." Specificity cuts through diffusion of responsibility. When a task belongs to everyone, it belongs to no one. When it belongs to one person, they act. Third, go first. The first person to act almost always breaks the paralysis for everyone else. Crowds follow. The bystander effect collapses the moment someone decides they won't be a bystander. There's something quietly hopeful in all of this. The people who did nothing weren't bad. They were doing what humans do in uncertain situations, looking around, waiting for cues, hoping someone else would take the weight. The bystander effect is a feature of how we process the world in groups, not a verdict on what we're capable of when we understand what's actually happening. Understanding it is the first step to being the person who breaks it. And if this video made you see yourself, or the people around you, a little differently, that's exactly what we're here for. Like the video if it hit, subscribe for new psychology content every single week, and bring someone along who you think needs to hear this. Every person who joins this channel makes it possible to keep making these. We'll see you in the next one.